I am Valentina, 29 years old, and I never imagined that a single Christmas dinner would expose the truth I had been desperately trying to ignore for 3 years. The memory burns in my mind like a brand. 17 guests seated around Isabella's mahogany dining table, watching as servers placed golden turkey and glazed ham before everyone except me. My empty plate gleamed under the chandelier's light, a beacon of my otherness. When my cousin Sophia asked why I received nothing, Isabella smiled with practiced elegance and delivered those words that still echo in my nightmares. The caterers only prepared for family members. I assumed Valentina would understand. The silence stretched like a chasm until I found my voice and spoke words that would change everything. If you're watching this, please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're from as I share what happened when I finally confronted the woman who spent years trying to erase me from her perfect family portrait. My story begins long before that devastating Christmas Eve. I grew up in a warm, chaotic household in Brooklyn with parents who immigrated from Colombia when I was 2. My father, Miguel, worked double shifts at a restaurant while studying English at night. My mother, Carmen, cleaned offices and took in sewing to make ends meet. They sacrificed everything to give me opportunities they never had in Bogota. Through their determination and countless sleepless nights, I became the first in our family to graduate from college, earning my degree in graphic design while working part-time at a coffee shop. By the time I met Alessandro, I had built a modest but successful freelance design business, specializing in branding for small businesses and nonprofits. My clients appreciated my creativity and dedication, and I took pride in helping entrepreneurs visualize their dreams. I lived in a cozy studio apartment in Queens, drove a reliable Honda Civic, and maintained close friendships with college classmates who understood the struggle of building careers from nothing. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, earned through hard work, late nights, and unwavering determination. I met Alessandro at an art gallery opening 2.5 years ago. I was there for work, photographing the event for a client's social media campaign. He was there as a patron, sophisticated in his tailored charcoal suit, examining paintings with the confidence of someone born into wealth. Our eyes met across the room while I was adjusting my camera settings, and something electric passed between us. When he approached and asked about my work, his genuine interest in my photography surprised me. "You have an incredible eye for capturing emotion," he said, studying the images on my camera's display. "These aren't just photographs, they're stories." We talked until the gallery staff dimmed the lights around us. Alessandro Romano came from old money. His family had built a shipping empire 3 generations ago that evolved into luxury real estate development. He attended private schools in Manhattan, graduated from Princeton, and moved effortlessly through social circles I'd only seen in movies. Despite our vastly different backgrounds, we connected on something deeper. He was intelligent, thoughtful, and made me laugh with his self-deprecating humor about growing up privileged. Our romance unfolded like a fairy tale. Within 8 months, he proposed during a weekend in the Hamptons, presenting a vintage Cartier ring that had belonged to his grandmother. I said yes without hesitation, believing love could bridge any gap between our worlds. That was my first critical mistake, underestimating how deeply class prejudice could run, especially in someone like Isabella Romano. I first encountered Alessandro's mother at our engagement announcement dinner at Le Bernardin. His father, Lorenzo, was courteous but distant, a distinguished man with silver temples who seemed more comfortable discussing market fluctuations than personal matters. But Isabella was an entirely different challenge. She arrived impeccably dressed in Chanel, her platinum blonde hair styled in a perfect chignon, diamond earrings catching the restaurant's ambient lighting. Her smile felt like winter sunshine, beautiful but providing no warmth. Throughout that first dinner, Isabella interrogated me with questions disguised as polite conversation. Where exactly in Brooklyn had I grown up? What did my parents do? Where did I attend university? Each answer seemed to deepen her disappointment, though she maintained a veneer of sophisticated politeness. She mentioned Alessandro's ex-girlfriend, Francesca, multiple times, noting her family's vineyard in Tuscany, her father's position as a federal judge, their shared summers in the Italian Riviera. Francesca and Alessandro made such a striking couple at the Met Gala last year, she reminisced, showing me a photo on her phone. Her mother and I serve on the same charity board. Such a shame their timing wasn't right. Alessandro seemed oblivious to these subtle attacks. He adored his mother and couldn't see past her polished facade. Whenever I gently mentioned her behavior later, he would defend her motivations. "Mama is just protective," he would say. "She wants to ensure I'm happy. Give her time, she'll warm up to you." Time, unfortunately, only seemed to sharpen her weapons. Alessandro's sister, Bianca, initially appeared welcoming, complimenting my jewelry or asking about my work, but I gradually recognized the underlying competition in her interactions. She constantly mentioned her own achievements, her MBA from Wharton, her position at a prestigious investment bank, her engagement to a pharmaceutical heir, while subtly correcting my pronunciation of Italian words or pointing out my unfamiliarity with their family traditions. Alessandro's younger brother, Matteo, and his wife, Gianna, maintained polite distance. They were cordial but never warm, following Isabella's lead in keeping me at arm's length. I later discovered that Gianna had endured similar treatment when she first joined the family, eventually earning approval by converting to Catholicism and working at Lorenzo's company. I tried everything to win Isabella's acceptance. I brought thoughtful gifts to family gatherings, artisan chocolates from a boutique she'd mentioned liking, a beautiful coffee table book about Italian Renaissance art. I researched topics she was passionate about, offered to design materials for her charity events, attempted to connect over our shared love of classical music. Each effort was either dismissed or forgotten. The chocolates sat unopened in her pantry. My offer to volunteer was declined because the committee is already perfectly staffed. The art book disappeared entirely. The only family member who showed me genuine warmth was my cousin Sophia, my mother's sister Elena's daughter, who had married into New York's Italian-American community and moved to Manhattan. Sophia was my lifeline, providing perspective and support when I felt like I was drowning in Isabella's subtle hostility. Unlike my parents, who lived in Florida now, Sophia could attend family functions and witness the dynamics firsthand. When the invitation arrived for Isabella's annual Christmas Eve dinner, I approached it with familiar dread mixed with stubborn hope. The elegant card, embossed with gold lettering, specified formal attire and a 7-course meal prepared by the family's personal chef. Sophia had also been invited, which was unusual but provided some comfort. I later learned that Lorenzo and Sophia's late husband had been business associates, something Isabella tolerated but never embraced. "This dinner means everything to Mama," Alessandro told me as we prepared for the event. "It's our most important family tradition. The whole extended family will be there, cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone." I nodded, selecting a sophisticated burgundy dress that I hoped would meet Isabella's exacting standards. "I'll do everything I can to make it perfect." If only I had known how that evening would unfold, and how it would finally force me to stop pretending that quiet endurance was the same as strength. The evening of Isabella's Christmas Eve celebration arrived with fresh snow dusting Manhattan streets like powdered sugar. Alessandro and I arrived at his parents' Fifth Avenue penthouse in our Uber, joining a line of luxury vehicles dropping off elegantly dressed guests. The building's doorman, dressed in holiday finery, directed us to the private elevator that opened directly into the Romano family's sprawling apartment. "You look stunning," Alessandro whispered, squeezing my hand as we rode up. I had spent hours preparing, wearing the burgundy dress I'd saved 2 months to afford, my hair professionally styled, and makeup carefully applied to look sophisticated yet understated. Isabella greeted us at the elevator herself, bypassing the catering staff who moved efficiently through the space setting up for the evening. She embraced Alessandro warmly, holding him close and exclaiming over how handsome he looked in his midnight blue suit. When she turned to me, her smile cooled perceptibly. She offered a brief air kiss, careful not to make actual contact with my cheek. "Valentina, you made it," she said, as though my attendance had been uncertain. She made no comment about my appearance before turning to welcome the guests arriving behind us. The penthouse was transformed into a winter wonderland, with elegant decorations that looked like they belonged in Architectural Digest. White flowers and silver accents complemented the apartment's already magnificent furnishings. Approximately 40 guests mingled in the spacious living areas, dressed in formal attire that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Servers in crisp uniforms circulated with champagne flutes and elaborate hors d'oeuvres while a pianist played Christmas classics near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. I recognized many faces from previous family gatherings: Lorenzo's brother Antonio and his wife, Alessandro's cousins from both coasts, several partners from the family business. Isabella's sister Claudia held court near the fireplace, gesturing dramatically as she recounted her recent trip to Milan. As Alessandro led me through the rooms, stopping to greet relatives and friends, I noticed the family photographs displayed throughout the apartment. Professional portraits of Alessandro and his siblings as children, candid shots from European vacations, several of Lorenzo and Isabella at charity galas. I searched but found no photos from our wedding, though there were recent pictures of both Matteo and Bianca with their spouses. "Alessandro, come here, son," Lorenzo called from across the room. Alessandro squeezed my hand apologetically before joining his father and several older men I recognized as family business associates. Left on my own, I wandered toward the dining room, admiring the spectacular table setting visible through the archway. The long table was set for 17 with Limoges china, Waterford crystal, and sterling silver arranged with mathematical precision. Place cards in elegant calligraphy marked each setting, accompanied by individual menus printed on cream cardstock. "Quite the production, isn't it?" a familiar voice said behind me. I turned to find Sophia, elegant in a deep emerald gown, her dark hair swept into a sophisticated updo. "Sophia!" I embraced her, genuinely relieved to see a friendly face. "I didn't know you'd be here tonight." "Isabella can't stand me, but Lorenzo insists on including me because of my late husband's friendship with the family," she said with a knowing smile. "I come for the entertainment value." As we chatted, a server approached with a tray of champagne flutes. He offered one to Sophia, then walked past me without stopping. I had to reach out and ask, "Excuse me, may I have one as well?" The server looked momentarily confused, then nodded and allowed me to take a glass. As he walked away, I noticed Isabella watching the interaction from across the room, her expression unreadable. "Don't let her see you sweat," Sophia whispered, following my gaze. "That's exactly what she wants." Throughout the next hour, I noticed similar small exclusions. Servers consistently overlooked me when offering canapés. When Bianca showed everyone her new Tiffany bracelet, a Christmas gift from her fiancé, Isabella suggested it was exactly the kind of timeless piece that reflects good breeding and taste, while glancing pointedly at my modest jewelry. The most obvious slight came when Isabella circulated through the room, personally ensuring everyone had fresh drinks and engaging in brief conversations with each guest. She approached Sophia and me near the windows overlooking the park, refreshing Sophia's champagne while asking about her recent business trip to Rome. Then, without acknowledging me, she turned to move away. As she did, her silk shawl caught my champagne flute, sending the contents splashing across my burgundy dress. "Oh dear," she said without genuine concern. "You should attend to that immediately. The powder room is down the hall, third door." In the bathroom, I dabbed at the stain with a hand towel, fighting back tears of frustration. Through the vent, I could hear voices from the adjacent study, which I realized was Isabella's private office. "She tries so desperately hard," Isabella's voice drifted through. "That dress is obviously off the rack, and those shoes with that handbag, no sense of proper coordination." "Mama, be kind," Bianca's voice replied, though she was laughing. "Alessandro seems content." "For now," Isabella said. "Francesca called yesterday, you know." Still unattached. "I've always believed they would find their way back to each other when the time was right." I froze, the damp towel pressed against my dress. Alessandro had dated Francesca for 4 years before meeting me. They had broken up because, according to Alessandro, she wanted different things from life. I had no idea they were still in contact, much less that Isabella was actively nurturing those connections. When I returned to the party, Alessandro was deep in conversation with his father about year-end financial projections. He barely noticed my return, nodding absently when I touched his arm. The strain of maintaining a pleasant expression while feeling increasingly unwelcome was becoming exhausting. Finally, Isabella announced that dinner would be served. Guests began moving toward the dining room, searching for their assigned seats. I walked along the elegantly appointed table, checking each hand-calligraphed place card, but couldn't find my name anywhere. "Alessandro," I whispered, "I don't see my place card." He looked surprised, then shrugged. "Probably just an oversight. Here, you can sit between Sophia and me." He casually pulled up an additional chair, disrupting the careful spacing of the place settings. The chair he added had no charger plate, no crystal glasses, none of the elaborate place setting that everyone else had. Isabella noticed immediately. "Alessandro, we had the seating arranged very specifically," she said, her voice tight with controlled displeasure. "It's fine, Mama. Valentina can sit here." As everyone settled into their seats, I felt Isabella's disapproving glances each time I spoke. When I answered Lorenzo's polite question about my recent work with a story about rebranding a successful nonprofit, Isabella interrupted to ask Gianna about their upcoming vacation to Switzerland, effectively cutting me off mid-sentence. The tension was building, but I had no idea how much worse things were about to become. The dining room glowed with the light of dozens of candles and an antique Murano glass chandelier. Fine china gleamed against the dark mahogany table, each place setting accompanied by an array of silverware that made me silently grateful for the etiquette lessons Sophia had given me months ago. Elaborate floral arrangements of white roses and silver branches created a sophisticated centerpiece running the length of the table. Once everyone was seated, servers appeared from the kitchen with choreographed precision. The head server announced the first course, a delicate butternut squash bisque with truffle oil and toasted pumpkin seeds, as white porcelain bowls were placed before each guest. Each guest except me. I sat awkwardly as everyone around me received their appetizer. Alessandro was engaged in an animated conversation with his cousin about real estate development opportunities and didn't immediately notice. Sophia, however, did. "Excuse me," she said to a passing server. "My cousin didn't receive the first course." The server looked uncomfortable and glanced toward Isabella, who smiled serenely from the head of the table. "I believe we're one portion short," Isabella said. "The chef prepared exact quantities for the invited guests. Perhaps Valentina could share with Alessandro?" The implication was crystal clear. I hadn't been included in the original count because I hadn't really been invited, merely tolerated as Alessandro's accessory. Alessandro finally noticed the situation and frowned slightly. "Mama, could the kitchen prepare another portion?" "The bisque is quite complex, dear. It requires precise timing. I'm sure Valentina understands." Her tone suggested that making an issue of it would be terribly unsophisticated. Alessandro hesitated, then pushed his bowl slightly toward me. "We can share," he said quietly before returning to his conversation with his cousin. I took a small spoonful of the bisque, my appetite diminishing with each passing moment. Around the table, conversation flowed about investments, recent travels, and Bianca's upcoming wedding. I remained silent, feeling increasingly invisible. When the second course arrived, seared scallops with saffron cream sauce, the pattern repeated. Everyone received a serving except me. This time I didn't bother to point it out, and neither did Alessandro. He absently offered me one of his scallops while discussing European market trends with his uncle. By the third course, a palate-cleansing blood orange sorbet, I noticed several guests casting uncomfortable glances in my direction as I sat with an empty place before me. Lorenzo appeared confused but said nothing, deferring to his wife's management of the dinner as he presumably had done for decades. Then came the main course. Servers entered carrying silver platters with perfectly roasted turkey, glazed ham, and an array of traditional Italian Christmas sides, roasted vegetables, creamy polenta, and Isabella's famous rosemary focaccia. The aroma filled the room and appreciative murmurs rippled around the table. A server placed filled plates before each person until he reached me. Instead of the feast everyone else received, he set down a small, plain garden salad with no dressing. The contrast between my sparse plate and the elaborate meals surrounding me couldn't have been more stark. Sophia set down her fork with a sharp clink against her plate. Isabella, why does Valentina have a salad when everyone else has turkey and ham? The table fell quiet, conversations pausing as attention turned to our end of the table. Isabella's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. I only ordered for family, she said, her voice honey-sweet but laced with venom. The caterers prepared exact portions. I assumed Valentina would understand something lighter might be more appropriate anyway. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel every eye on me, waiting for my reaction. Next to me, Alessandro continued cutting his turkey, his eyes fixed firmly on his plate. Am I family or not? I asked him quietly. Alessandro glanced up, his expression pained. Don't do this. Not here, he muttered, still chewing. That was when something inside me shattered. 3 years of subtle exclusions, of pretending not to notice, of shrinking myself to fit into spaces that were never meant for me, it all crashed down at once. I had endured Isabella's passive-aggressive warfare for Alessandro's sake, believing that eventually she would accept me. But sitting there with a plain salad while everyone else enjoyed a Christmas feast, I realized nothing would ever change unless I made it change. As dessert was served, individual panettone bread puddings with vanilla bean sauce, rising magnificently from ceramic ramekins, I once again received nothing. Not even a cookie or a mint, just an empty space where my dessert should have been. I watched as everyone at the table savored their puddings, making appreciative noises and complimenting Isabella on the menu selection. Alessandro was so absorbed in his dessert that he didn't offer to share, didn't even seem to notice that I sat beside him with nothing. My hands trembled slightly in my lap as I gathered my courage. Sophia sensed my resolve and squeezed my hand under the table, a silent gesture of support that gave me the final push I needed. I had spent 3 years trying to earn a place in a family that had no intention of making room for me. 3 years of diminishing myself, accepting disrespect, and pretending not to notice the 1,000 paper cuts to my dignity. As I looked around at the family enjoying their Christmas celebration while I sat excluded like an unwelcome stranger, I knew this moment would define our future. I could remain silent and accept my permanent status as an outsider, or I could stand up for myself, whatever the consequences. I chose to stand up. Actually, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing heart, I'd like to address something. The conversations around the table gradually quieted as people realized I was speaking. Alessandro tensed beside me, his spoon pausing midway to his mouth. Valentina, he whispered, not now. But I continued, my gaze fixed on Isabella at the head of the table. For 3 years I have tried to be part of this family. I have overlooked the slights, excused the accidental exclusions, and accepted being treated as less than. But tonight has made something crystal clear that I can no longer ignore. Isabella's smile remained frozen, though her knuckles whitened around her dessert spoon. I'm not sure what you mean, dear. This is hardly the time for whatever grievance you've manufactured. Manufactured? I repeated, maintaining my composure. Let me be specific then. Tonight, I was the only person not given a place card. I was the only one servers consistently overlooked for drinks and appetizers. I received a plain salad while everyone else enjoyed turkey and ham, and now no dessert. I looked around the table, meeting the eyes of each family member. Some looked away uncomfortably, others appeared surprised, as if they hadn't noticed the pattern until I pointed it out. But this isn't just about tonight, I continued. It's about the wedding shower where everyone received gifts except me because I wasn't on the family list. It's about the family vacation photos where I was asked to step aside so you could get just the family. It's about being the only spouse not included in the family Christmas card. Lorenzo frowned, looking genuinely confused. Isabella, is this true? Before Isabella could respond, Sophia spoke up. It's all true, Lorenzo. I've witnessed it myself multiple times. This is ridiculous, Isabella said, her voice rising slightly. Valentina has always been overly sensitive. We have done nothing but welcome her into our home. Welcome me? I echoed in disbelief. You have systematically excluded me from day one. You compare me unfavorably to Francesca at every opportunity. You forget to include me in family events. You dismiss my career, my background, everything about me. Alessandro finally found his voice. Valentina, you're embarrassing yourself and my family. This is Christmas Eve dinner with our entire extended family. His words stung worse than anything Isabella had ever done. Your family, I repeated. After 3 years together, I'm still not part of your family in your mind. That's not what I meant, Alessandro backpedaled, looking around at the uncomfortable faces of his relatives. Isn't it? I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. 2 weeks ago, you and your mother exchanged texts about me. Would you like me to read them to everyone? Alessandro's face drained of color. You went through my phone? I didn't have to. You left it open on the kitchen counter when you went to answer the door. The notification from Mama caught my eye. I scrolled to the saved screenshot. Your mother wrote, and I quote, Valentina looked completely out of place at the charity gala. Could you not have at least coached her on appropriate attire? Francesca always understood these events instinctively. And you replied, I know, Mama. Sometimes I wonder if she'll ever truly fit in with our world. Gasps and murmurs rippled around the table. Bianca looked down at her plate. Matteo and Gianna exchanged glances. You never defended me, I said to Alessandro, my voice finally cracking with emotion. Not once in 3 years have you stood up to your mother when she belittled me. How dare you? Isabella hissed, abandoning her poised facade. Alessandro has given you a life you never could have achieved on your own. A nobody from a nothing family, and this is your gratitude. Mama! Bianca exclaimed, shocked at the naked hostility. Lorenzo stood up, his napkin falling to the floor. Isabella, that's enough. No, Lorenzo, it is not enough, Isabella continued, her carefully constructed image crumbling. She has never been good enough for our son, and everyone at this table knows it. I have merely been the only one with the courage to acknowledge it. Alessandro looked torn, his gaze moving between his mother and me. Mama, please stop. Choose, Alessandro, Isabella demanded. Right now? Your family or her? The silence that followed her ultimatum was absolute. 16 pairs of eyes turned to Alessandro, waiting for his response. I held my breath, part of me still hoping against all evidence that he would finally choose me. Alessandro swallowed hard, looking at his mother, then at me, then down at his half-eaten bread pudding. His silence was answer enough. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin beside my empty plate. Thank you for making this so clear, both of you. I won't stay where I'm not wanted or respected. Dignity was all I had left, and I clung to it as I walked out of the dining room. No one called after me. No one followed, not even Alessandro. In the foyer, I collected my coat from the confused catering staff and stepped out into the snowy New York night. Tears threatened, but I refused to shed them on Isabella's property. I made it to the elevator before I heard footsteps behind me. Valentina, wait. It was Sophia, not Alessandro. I need to go, I said, fumbling with the elevator button. I know, sweetheart, but you shouldn't be alone right now. Let me take you home. I can manage, I insisted, though my hands were shaking. I'm not asking, Sophia said firmly. And Valentina? I'm proud of you. What you did in there took tremendous courage. As we rode down in the elevator, I glanced back one last time. Through the penthouse windows, I could see the warm glow of the continuing dinner party. There was no sign of Alessandro in the lobby, no indication that my husband had chosen to follow his wife instead of remaining with his mother. That told me everything I needed to know. We arrived at my queen's apartment with Sophia close behind. The building's lobby looked shabby after the evening's luxury, but it felt honest in a way Isabella's world never had. In the elevator, I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Do you want me to come up? Sophia asked gently. I shook my head. I need some time alone, but thank you for being there tonight. Call me any time, day or night, she insisted, hugging me tightly before the elevator doors opened to my floor. Inside our apartment, the silence was deafening. Photos of Alessandro and me from happier times seemed to mock me from the walls. Our engagement photo, taken during that blissful weekend in the Hamptons, held the place of honor above our small fireplace. We looked so hopeful, so certain that love could conquer anything. That couple seemed like strangers now. Only when the door was locked behind me did I finally let the tears come. I sank to the floor in my expensive dress, my back against the door, and sobbed until my throat was raw and my eyes burned. All the hurt, humiliation, and betrayal poured out in waves that left me gasping for breath. My phone buzzed relentlessly with calls from Alessandro, but I let them go to voicemail. When I finally listened to his messages hours later, there was no apology, only anger. How could you embarrass my family like that? On Christmas Eve of all nights, in front of everyone? Valentina, you need to call my mother and apologize immediately. The unfairness of his demand unleashed a fresh wave of tears. In what universe was I the one who owed an apology? Around 2 a.m., I heard Alessandro's key in the lock. I had moved from the floor to the bedroom by then, sitting on our bed with a suitcase half-packed beside me. What are you doing? He demanded, seeing the suitcase. Packing, I said simply. I'm going to stay with Sophia for a while. Don't be dramatic, he scoffed. Running away won't solve anything. I'm not running away. I'm removing myself from a situation where I'm not respected or valued. Alessandro paced the room, running his hands through his hair in frustration. You humiliated my mother in front of our entire family. What did you expect would happen? What did I expect? I repeated incredulously. I expected my boyfriend to defend me when his mother deliberately excluded and insulted me. I expected to be treated with basic human decency at a family dinner. My mother is particular about her events. You know that. Particular? I laughed bitterly. Alessandro, she served me a plain salad while everyone else got turkey and ham. She didn't give me dessert. How can you possibly defend that? You're exaggerating as usual, he dismissed. If you had just quietly spoken to me after dinner instead of making a scene. Like all the other times I've quietly spoken to you about your mother's behavior? When has that ever changed anything? Alessandro sat heavily on the edge of the bed. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The business is expanding. My mother has always done things a certain way. A certain way that deliberately excludes and humiliates your girlfriend, I said flatly. She's having a hard time adjusting to changes in the family. If you would just try harder to fit in. Something in me snapped at those words. Try harder? I have done nothing but try for 3 years. I have changed how I dress, how I speak, what I talk about. I've attended every family function, joined committees, donated to charities I can't afford. What more could I possibly do? You could start by apologizing to my mother. I zipped the suitcase closed with finality. I will not apologize for finally standing up for myself. As I moved toward the door, Alessandro blocked my path. If you leave now, you're choosing this conflict over our relationship. No, Alessandro. You already made that choice when you sat silently while your mother treated me like garbage. When you texted her agreeing that I don't fit in. When you demanded I apologize instead of acknowledging how deeply I've been hurt. I pushed past him with my suitcase, but his next words stopped me cold. She warned me, you know. My mother said you would never truly fit into our world, that eventually you would show your true colors. I turned to face him one last time. And she warned me too, in her way. She told me at our first dinner that your relationship with Francesca ended because of career conflicts. But that was a lie, wasn't it? It ended because Francesca finally got tired of your mother's treatment and your failure to stand up to her. Alessandro's shocked expression confirmed my suspicion. How did you know about that? I didn't until just now. But it makes sense. Has your mother been in contact with Francesca recently? Perhaps arranged some coincidental meetings? Alessandro's silence was damning. "That's what I thought," I said quietly. "Goodbye, Alessandro." I spent that night on Sophia's couch, alternating between tears and numbness. In the morning, Sophia made coffee and sat beside me. "What happens now?" she asked gently. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to fight for this relationship, but a larger part is wondering if there's anything left worth fighting for." The next weeks passed in a blur of conflicting emotions and difficult decisions. Alessandro called and texted constantly, alternating between demands that I return and apologies that never quite addressed the real issues. I maintained minimal contact, telling him I needed space to think. Then came unexpected support from within the Romano family. Matteo called me privately, something he had never done before. "Valentina, I want you to know that Gianna and I support you," he said awkwardly. "What happened at Christmas dinner was wrong. Mama has always been controlling, but this was beyond anything acceptable." Later that day, Gianna texted me, "When I first married Matteo, Isabella treated me similarly. Not as extreme, but the same pattern. It took joining the family business and converting to Catholicism before she accepted me. I wanted you to know you're not alone or crazy. What she did was cruel." Even more surprising was Bianca showing up at Sophia's apartment unannounced. "I should have said something that night," she admitted, looking genuinely remorseful. "I've watched Mama treat you poorly for 3 years and said nothing. I was afraid of becoming her next target." "Has she always been like this?" I asked. Bianca nodded. "With anyone she perceives as a threat to her control over the family. Yes. Papa has enabled it for decades. Matteo and I learned to navigate it. Alessandro was always her favorite, so he never had to." The most awkward interaction came when Lorenzo called me directly. "Valentina, this is Lorenzo," he said formally. "I want to apologize for what happened in our home. I had no idea the extent of, well, I should have been more observant, more involved." "Thank you," I said, surprised by his call. "Isabella and I are discussing this situation," he continued. "I want you to know that I consider you family, regardless of how poorly that was demonstrated." While these unexpected allies helped, Alessandro's behavior grew more concerning. He seemed to swing between contrition and anger, never fully acknowledging the fundamental problem. 3 weeks after Christmas, he delivered an ultimatum of his own. "Either you come home and make peace with my mother, or we need to rethink our entire relationship." That same day, I received a certified letter from a lawyer representing Isabella Romano, claiming I had borrowed and failed to return several items of jewelry from her home. It was a blatant lie and an obvious attempt at intimidation. That evening, I called Maria, a colleague who had become a close friend. She listened to the whole story without interruption. "Valentina, what you're describing is a toxic family system," she said finally. "Alessandro is deeply enmeshed with his mother. He may love you, but he's been conditioned his entire life to prioritize her approval above all else. So what do I do? First, document everything. Every text, email, the lawyer's letter. And second, I think you should consult with a relationship counselor, even if just to understand your options." 2 days later, I had my first individual therapy session. The counselor helped me understand the dynamics I'd been trapped in and the patterns I'd unconsciously accepted. "You've been trying to earn something that was never going to be freely given," she explained. "Isabella's acceptance was always conditional on you becoming someone else entirely." That evening, my phone rang with Alessandro's number. I almost sent it to voicemail, but decided to answer. "Can we meet?" he asked, his voice subdued. "Just to talk. Neutral ground." After a moment's hesitation, I agreed. The coffee shop near Sophia's apartment. "Tomorrow at 10 a.m. "I'll be there," he promised. I hung up, wondering if this meeting would provide closure or a new beginning. Either way, I was no longer the same woman who had sat silently accepting disrespect at Isabella's Christmas table. That Valentina was gone forever. The coffee shop buzzed with Saturday morning energy when I arrived 5 minutes early for my meeting with Alessandro. I chose a table in the corner, partially hidden by exposed brick walls that offered some privacy without complete isolation. My hands wrapped around a ceramic mug of cappuccino that I had barely tasted, my stomach too knotted with anxiety to accommodate even coffee. When Alessandro walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. In just 4 weeks, he seemed to have aged years. His usually impeccable appearance was slightly disheveled, his hair less perfectly styled, dark circles prominent under his eyes. He spotted me immediately and made his way over, carrying his own espresso. "Thank you for meeting me," he said formally, as if we were business associates rather than people who had shared 3 years of their lives. "You wanted to talk," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "So talk." Alessandro took a deep breath, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past weeks. And I realize I owe you an apology. The way things happened at Christmas was inappropriate." I raised an eyebrow. "Inappropriate? Is that really the word you want to use for what happened?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Valentina, I'm trying here." "Are you? Because it sounds like you're minimizing what happened. Your mother deliberately excluded and humiliated me, and you let her. Then you demanded I apologize to her." "I know," he said, his voice dropping. "I know how that sounds now. At the time, I was just reacting the way I always have. Mama gets upset, we all scramble to smooth things over. Even when she's completely in the wrong?" "Especially then," he admitted quietly. "It's always been easier to placate her than confront her." I pulled a folder from my bag and placed it on the table between us. "I brought something I want you to see." "What is this?" "Evidence." "Open it," I said simply. Inside were printouts of text exchanges, emails, photos documenting 3 years of systematic exclusion and undermining by Isabella, all organized chronologically with dates and brief explanations. Alessandro flipped through the pages slowly, his expression growing more troubled with each one. "You kept all of this?" "Not intentionally at first, but after a while I started documenting things because you always dismissed my concerns. I needed to prove to myself I wasn't imagining it." He paused at a screenshot of his text exchange with Isabella about me not fitting in. "I remember this. I was frustrated that night, angry that things were always so tense between you and Mama. I should never have said that." "No, you shouldn't have," I agreed. "But what hurts more is that you never stood up for me. Not once in all these incidents." A young barista approached our table to refill our drinks. "Everything okay over here?" she asked, perhaps sensing the tension. "Fine, thank you," Alessandro replied automatically. After she moved away, he leaned forward. "Valentina, I want to tell you something that happened after you left the dinner." I steeled myself. "Go ahead." "After you walked out, there was this horrible silence. Then Aunt Claudia started saying you were overreacting and Mama began crying about how disrespectful you were. But Papa stood up and said, 'Enough, Isabella. What you did tonight was cruel and deliberate, and I won't pretend otherwise.'" I blinked in surprise. Lorenzo had always been so passive in the face of Isabella's behavior. He told everyone at the table that he had watched for years as Mama controlled who was in and who was out of the family, and that he had been a coward for allowing it. He said he was ashamed of her behavior and mine. "Yours?" Alessandro nodded. He took me aside afterward and said something I can't stop thinking about. He said, "I failed to protect your mother from her worst instincts, and now you're failing to protect your girlfriend. Don't make my mistake, son. It leads to a half-lived life." I sat back, processing this information. "What did you say?" "Nothing. At first, I was still defending Mama out of habit. But then Papa showed me something." Alessandro pulled out his phone and scrolled to find a photo. "This." He handed me his phone. On the screen was a picture I had never seen before of Lorenzo and a young woman at what appeared to be a college formal dance. "That's Papa and your cousin Sophia," Alessandro explained. "They dated seriously in college. Papa was going to propose, but his parents disapproved. Sophia came from a middle-class background, worked her way through school. Sound familiar? What happened? His parents pressured him to break it off and introduced him to Mama, who came from the right kind of family. Papa chose the path of least resistance. He told me he's regretted it his entire life. I handed the phone back, unsure what to say. The revelation recontextualized so much about Lorenzo's behavior, about Sophia's presence at family events, about the subtle dynamics I'd never fully understood. The point is, Alessandro continued, I saw myself making the same mistake, and the thought of a lifetime of regret terrified me. So what are you saying exactly? I'm saying I was wrong about everything. The way I let Mama treat you. The way I failed to stand up for you. The way I prioritized keeping the peace over protecting the person I love most in the world. For the first time in our conversation, I felt a tiny crack in the wall I had built around my heart. Words are easy, Alessandro. What about actions? That's why I'm here. I want to go to couples counseling. I want to learn how to be the partner you deserve. And I've already told Mama that our relationship cannot continue as it has been. How did she take that? Not well, he admitted with a rueful smile. There were tears, accusations, threats to cut me off financially. But I held firm. I told her that if she wants me in her life, she has to respect you and our relationship. And if she can't do that, then we'll have limited contact with her. I'm not willing to lose you, Valentina. These weeks apart have been the worst of my life. I wanted to believe him, but there was still one thing bothering me. What about Francesca? Alessandro looked genuinely confused. What about her? Your mother has been meeting with her. Are you in contact with her too? No, he said firmly. I had no idea Mama was seeing her until you mentioned it Christmas night. I called Francesca afterward to ask about it. Turns out Mama has been trying to orchestrate some accidental meeting between us for months. Francesca only went along with it because Mama told her our relationship was struggling. And was that the first time you've spoken to her since we've been together? Yes, he insisted. Francesca and I didn't work for good reasons, and we both moved on completely. She actually told me to fix things with you because I seemed happier than she had ever seen me when we were together. The barista returned, this time with a concerned expression. Sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing a bit. My mother-in-law was similar. Sometimes talking through these things helps. She placed 2 small biscotti on our table. On the house. After she left, Alessandro and I both laughed softly, breaking some of the tension. I'm not saying one conversation fixes everything, Alessandro said. I know I have a lot to prove to you. But I'm asking for a chance to do that. Will you come to a therapy session with me? I've already found someone who specializes in family systems. I considered his request carefully. Despite everything, I still loved him, and for the first time he seemed to truly understand the problem and be willing to address it. One session, I agreed cautiously. We can start with that. The relief on his face was palpable. Thank you. 2 days later, we sat in Dr. Martinez's office, a warmly appointed space with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. After introductions, she asked us to explain what brought us there. I let Alessandro go first, wanting to hear how he would frame the situation. To my surprise, he was unflinchingly honest about his mother's behavior, his enabling of it, and his failure to support me. I grew up believing that keeping Mama happy was everyone's responsibility, he explained. It was easier to go along with her demands than deal with the emotional fallout of challenging her. I never realized how toxic that pattern was until I saw it through Valentina's eyes, and even then I resisted acknowledging it. Dr. Martinez nodded. That's very common in families with controlling members. The entire system adapts to accommodate the controller's needs. When it was my turn, I described my experience of isolation and exclusion, the constant message that I was not truly part of the family. What I struggle with most, I admitted, is not knowing if Alessandro and I can move forward when his mother remains such a destructive force in our lives. That's a valid concern, Dr. Martinez acknowledged. Alessandro, are you willing to establish and maintain boundaries with your mother to protect your relationship? Yes, he said without hesitation. I've already started. We spent the rest of the session discussing specific boundaries and communication strategies. By the end, I felt cautiously optimistic. Alessandro seemed genuinely committed to change, and having a neutral third party validate my experiences was profoundly healing. A week later, Alessandro proposed a meeting with his parents at Lorenzo's office, neutral territory away from Isabella's home turf. I agreed, though anxiety knotted my stomach as we rode the elevator to the top floor of Romano Development's Manhattan headquarters. Lorenzo greeted us in the reception area, looking formal but with a warmth in his eyes I had rarely seen before. "Thank you both for coming," he said, leading us to a conference room where Isabella waited. She sat rigidly in her chair, perfectly groomed as always, but with an unfamiliar tension in her posture. She didn't stand when we entered. "Isabella," Lorenzo said firmly, "we agreed about how this meeting would proceed." With visible reluctance, she rose and extended her hand to me. "Valentina, thank you for coming." The next hour was one of the most difficult of my life. Alessandro clearly outlined the changes necessary for us to maintain a relationship with his parents, particularly Isabella. These included treating me with respect at all times, acknowledging me as a full family member, and ceasing all attempts to undermine our relationship. "If these boundaries are not respected," Alessandro concluded, "we will limit our contact." "That's not a threat, Mama. It's simply what needs to happen for my relationship to thrive." Isabella's face cycled through emotions: disbelief, anger, hurt, calculation. Finally, she settled on controlled neutrality. "I believe my actions have been misinterpreted," she began. "Mama," Alessandro interrupted, "we're not here to debate whether your behavior was hurtful. It was. The question is whether you can change it going forward." Lorenzo placed his hand over Isabella's. "We've discussed this extensively, Isabella. It's time to make a choice about what kind of relationship you want with our son and his girlfriend." The term girlfriend hung in the air, a reminder of my legitimate place in Alessandro's life that Isabella had tried so hard to deny. After a long silence, Isabella spoke. "I would like to suggest family counseling. If there have been misunderstandings, perhaps a professional could help us communicate better." It wasn't an apology, but it was a concession, a willingness to engage in a process that might lead to change. For Isabella, it was a significant step. Alessandro looked at me, leaving the decision in my hands. I thought about all we had been through, the hurt and betrayal, but also the possibility of healing. "I think that could be helpful," I said finally, "if everyone commits to the process honestly." As we left the meeting, Alessandro squeezed my hand. "Thank you for giving this a chance. I know it wasn't easy." "It's just a beginning," I cautioned. "I know," he agreed. "But it's a beginning I didn't think was possible 4 weeks ago." Walking out of the building into the bright winter sunlight, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Not certainty, not complete trust, but hope. It was enough for now. 6 months passed, bringing changes I could never have imagined on that devastating Christmas Eve when I sat at Isabella's table with an empty plate. Spring had arrived in New York, trees budding with new life that seemed to mirror the transformation in our family relationships. Alessandro had grown in ways that consistently surprised and moved me. The man who once silently allowed his mother to exclude me now stood firmly as my advocate. In our weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez, he had excavated the patterns of his childhood, understanding how they had shaped his responses to conflict, particularly with his mother. "I was trained from birth to keep Mama happy at all costs," he explained during one session. "Any disruption to her vision of how things should be resulted in emotional consequences for everyone. I learned to anticipate her needs, smooth over problems before they reached her, and never, ever challenge her directly." Dr. Martinez helped him see how these coping mechanisms, while necessary in childhood, were destructive in his adult relationships. "Your primary loyalty now belongs to your romantic partnership," she reminded him. "That requires a fundamental shift in your priorities." To his credit, Alessandro embraced this difficult work wholeheartedly. He established clear boundaries with Isabella, maintained them consistently, and supported me when family tensions arose, as they inevitably did. The family therapy sessions Lorenzo had suggested actually materialized, though not without resistance from Isabella. Under the guidance of Dr. Winters, a therapist specializing in family systems, we began the messy, uncomfortable process of addressing decades of dysfunctional patterns. "Isabella," Dr. Winters said during our third session, "your behavior suggests a deep fear of abandonment. You try to control family relationships because you're afraid of losing your central role." Isabella bristled visibly. "That's absurd. I simply maintain certain standards for our family. Standards that conveniently exclude anyone you perceive as a threat to your influence," Lorenzo noted, with a gentleness that took some of the sting from his words. Over time, these difficult conversations began to yield insights. Isabella reluctantly revealed aspects of her own upbringing: her mother's conditional love, her father's emotional distance, the pressure she felt to maintain a perfect facade at all costs. "I was taught that appearances matter above all else," she admitted in our sixth session. "That people would only value me if I represented something enviable." This didn't excuse her behavior toward me, but it helped me understand its origins. The woman who had seemed like an implacable enemy began to appear more human, damaged by her own past in ways that had rippled outward to affect everyone around her. Our personal life evolved alongside these therapeutic interventions. Alessandro and I moved from Sophia's apartment back to our own place, rebuilding our relationship day by day. We established new traditions, including hosting our own monthly dinner parties where everyone was genuinely welcome. These gatherings became a healing space for the extended family. Matteo and Gianna, freed from the constraint of Isabella's approval, shared more openly about their own struggles. Bianca, who had always competed for her mother's attention, relaxed into more authentic relationships with everyone, including me. Most surprisingly, Lorenzo emerged from the shadow of decades of acquiescence to become a more active participant in family life. He began calling Alessandro regularly, not just about business but to check in on our well-being. He invited me to lunch occasionally, asking thoughtful questions about my design practice and sharing stories about his own early career challenges. "I regret many things," he told me during one such lunch. "But mostly I regret not being brave enough to challenge the dynamics that hurt people I care about. I can't get those years back, but I can do better now." Sophia remained my steadfast ally through it all. "I'm so proud of you," she said often. "Standing up for yourself changed not just your relationship, but this entire family system." The most tangible evidence of our progress came 4 months after Christmas when Isabella invited us to their penthouse for Lorenzo's birthday. I entered the space with trepidation, memories of past humiliations fresh in my mind despite the therapeutic work we had done. But this time, something was different. Isabella greeted me with a stiff but sincere welcome. The dining table included a proper place setting for me, and a photo from our engagement party had appeared among the family pictures in the living room. "I consulted with the chef about the menu," Isabella said awkwardly as we sat down to dinner. "There's grilled salmon as an alternative to the lamb if you prefer." It was a small gesture, but significant coming from a woman who had once served me nothing but a plain salad while everyone else enjoyed a feast. "Thank you," I said simply. "Salmon sounds perfect." The most profound change in our lives, however, came unexpectedly in the form of 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. Alessandro and I had discussed having children someday, but the timing surprised us both. When we shared the news with his parents, Isabella's reaction revealed how far we had come and how far we still had to go. "A grandchild," she said, her expression a complex mixture of genuine joy and calculation. "I'll need to convert the guest suite into a nursery for when you visit." Alessandro met my eyes across the table, reading my discomfort. "Mama, we appreciate that, but let's take things one step at a time. We'll discuss visiting arrangements that work for everyone as the pregnancy progresses." Isabella's smile tightened, but she nodded. "Of course. I'm just excited." Later, in private, Alessandro reassured me. "Our child will never experience what you did. We'll make sure of that. I believed him. The man who had once been unable to stand up to his mother was now committed to protecting both me and our unborn child from toxic family dynamics. As my pregnancy progressed, I reflected often on the lessons of the past year. Standing up for myself that night at Isabella's Christmas table had been terrifying but necessary. It forced a crisis that ultimately led to healing that could never have occurred otherwise. I learned that maintaining dignity sometimes requires risking relationships. That real love includes respect and protection. That families can change when brave individuals refuse to participate in dysfunctional patterns. Most importantly, I learned that creating family is about more than blood or marriage certificates. It's about building relationships based on mutual respect, clear boundaries, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Today, our family photo includes not just Alessandro and me, but Sofia, Lorenzo, Matteo and Gianna, Bianca and her fiancé, and yes, even Isabella. It's not a perfect family, not without its tensions and ongoing work, but it's a family where everyone is seen, included, and valued. As I look toward the future, preparing to welcome our child into this imperfect but evolving family, I feel grateful for the painful journey that brought us here. The empty plate that once symbolized my exclusion led to a fuller life than I could have imagined. If you've ever faced similar struggles with in-laws or family dynamics, remember that you deserve respect and inclusion. Standing up for yourself may be frightening, but remaining silent only ensures that nothing will change. Your voice matters. Your place at the table matters. Have you experienced challenges with family members who made you feel excluded? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too deserve a place at the table. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, creating healthy family relationships is always worth the difficult work it requires.